On today's episode of the Old Souls Football Podcast, we look at the early years of the Patriots Dynasty by recapping the first 4 episodes of The Dynasty on Apple TV. We look at the early years of Robert Kraft, Bill Belichick, and Tom Brady. All that next.
All right, so we continue our long trudge through the offseason. We're 100 days away from Chiefs, and who are they playing week 1?
The Ravens.
The Ravens. We're exactly 100 days as we film right now, which means tomorrow will be 100 days from the Packers playing in Rio de Janeiro, is it?
Sao Paulo.
Sao Paulo.
Yeah. So
Can't come fast enough.
I think that's the first NFL game played in the Southern Hemisphere. Will be that game.
Yeah.
So, yeah, fun facts. So, but today's episode, we're going through the Dynasty because we're doing a little off season kind of. We're trudging through. We did some draft stuff. We're going back to the NFL history book here. So you and I decided to do a
little TV review sort of a thing here.
Yes. Here you go ahead.
Yeah, so the Dynasty came out, obviously, for anybody who's not picking up on what it is or hasn't watched it yet or has not even heard about it. The Dynasty is a 10-part docuseries, which you don't get a lot of 10-part docuseries anymore. They're usually like 3 or 4 because people don't have the attention spans. About the New England Patriots, the 21st century New England Patriots, and all that. So, Stephen, what were your, like, going into this, like when we talked about, hey, let's try doing this, what were your thoughts going in? Were you expecting like me being a Chicagoan? I think back to The Last Dance. That was a 10-part series. And of course, I'm a Bulls fan, so I was absolutely locked in for every single episode. I loved it. I could rewatch that anytime ever for the rest of my life. Going into this one, I did feel like the other part with The Last Dance is when they started broadcasting that, it was during COVID, so we had literally nothing to hold our attention. And the second thing was they had, there was a lot of PR for that for a few years. Like it was kind of like teased for a while. And also there had been
never before seen tape.
Yes, never before seen. Bulls. And it had been over 20 years since that had ended. Now we're only technically, like, Belichick's reign just ended. And Brady left New England, I guess 4 years ago now.
Yep.
So it is still, it's not fresh anymore, we might say, but it's much more relatively new than, say, The Last Dance was a few years ago. So I was kind of like, I don't know. I didn't know what to expect of it. What about you?
So I'll go ahead and kind of give, like, the Last Dance is a kind of a great way of looking at it, because when you look at these like documentary style films, I mean, they're not completely objective. Obviously, you have to think of the money and the people and the influence that goes into them.
Mm-hmm.
So, like with The Last Dance, it was obviously going to be pro Michael Jordan, obviously number one, because he's the subject matter and he's probably the most important person to give access to in terms of interviewing. So he's going to create the narrative. And the number 2, and I always we've talked about this at length, and I don't want to make this like a Last Dance episode.
Yeah.
But like they shit on Jerry Krause a lot in that, and I think unfairly in a lot of cases, because number one, it's unfair because he couldn't defend himself because he had passed away before they started producing it. So he couldn't be interviewed. But the other thing, it's like there are egos, that there are human beings involved. And when that happens, like with any great company, any great organization, any great business, sports team, whatever, egos always get in the way. And that's whether they're great quarterbacks, they're great shooting guards, they're great executives, or they're great coaches.
Yeah.
So, uh, that I like The Last Dance is a great point because I think a lot of people at the end of the 2023 season had a negative perception of Bill Belichick.
Yeah.
They had a positive perception of Tom Brady, and they had a neutral perspective on Robert Kraft, I would say.
Hmm.
And I'm not necessarily saying that I disagree with that. I think, there's I tend to think that I'm more neutral on all of them. I think all three of them are going to be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, first ballot, all
Yeah.
three of them. Kraft might already be in there, but like the
I was kind of thinking if he's not in there
as a
already, I'm
contributor.
surprised he hasn't gotten there
Yeah.
yet.
But like, and he's done a lot for the league and a lot of good things. He's like one of the top people when it comes to like negotiating the rights fees. He's made a lot of people a lot of money in the NFL and made a lot of millionaires out of players. So he's done a lot of good for the NFL. But with I think a lot of people just make assumptions. And with Belichick, like a lot of people with his legacy, they're gonna say, well, look, he never won without Brady. And where the whole dynasty starts off is Belichick made Brady.
Yeah.
That's one of his legacies is Tom Brady. You can't have Tom Brady without Bill Belichick. Now, is Tom Brady great? Obviously. But it's and the first episode kind of goes into that where you have Bledsoe gets hurt because it was Mo Lewis that hit him, right? Week 2 of
Yes.
2001. So Mo Lewis basically, was it a ruptured spleen? Or no, it was a punctured lung or
It
something
was a
like that.
punctured lung. Did
Yeah.
you see like when there was like a camera shot? It was hard to see, but there was a camera shot of him on the ground and you could see his eyes and he literally looked like he wasn't alive. Like he was in total like shock.
Yeah. What's crazy is that's the closest outside of DeMar Hamlin we've probably ever had a guy dying on the field.
Coming to dying on the field. Yeah.
Yeah. Granted, he would have died probably more likely like on the way to the hospital if they hadn't figured
Yes.
out that he
Or
had
in the operating room
ruptured a
or
lung.
something.
Yeah, because I think blood was pouring into his lung. But anyway, outside of DeMar Hamlin, we've never really, thankfully, had a situation that bad. We've had scary injuries like Ryan Shazier and a couple of others.
Yeah. Well, at
But
least in the last 30 years or so.
yeah, so like uh, but anyway, like so that injury happens. And what was really the subject matter for the first episode, and I think the most valuable episode. And granted, I haven't watched, episodes 5 through 10, right?
Yeah.
But I have a feeling that this is going to be the most valuable learning episode for a lot of casual fans out there because it wasn't like a slam dunk decision to not only draft Tom Brady. He was 199th pick in the draft. Like,
Mm-hmm.
Not a slam dunk. Like he wasn't dominant at Michigan. He was good. He definitely got underdrafted. But let's not pretend that he was out there and he was Peyton Manning while he was in
Yeah.
college. And in 2001, Bledsoe gets hurt. Brady comes in and is good. I think they even basically say though they were built on running the football and playing defense. And the early Belichick teams with the Patriots, the early 2000s, that's the way they won was dominant defensive play. And the controversy actually happened when Bledsoe was cleared to play. And I actually had forgotten how much shit Bill Belichick took for the decision
Yeah.
to start Brady over Bledsoe. And what's so funny to me are the talking heads that you see on X, the fantasy football dorks that think they're smarter than everybody else.
Yep.
They're the first people to dog on Belichick
Mm-hmm.
because of how poorly he did from 2020 through 2020, I guess 3, right?
Yeah.
Without Tom Brady. Well, to give him credit, he saw something in Brady before anyone else did
Exactly.
because he went in the 6th round. He was not a slam dunk. They had their quote unquote franchise quarterback. There's very few instances where teams make that kind of decision. In almost every single situation, the team took a lot of crap for doing that. It's really, I could think of 3 and maybe 4 now that it's happened. And all 3 of the first 3 that I thought of were positive outcomes for the teams that made those controversial decisions at quarterback. You had in 2005, you had the Packers taking Aaron Rodgers while they had Brett Favre.
Yeah.
In 2020, you had the Eagles taking Jalen Hurts when they had just paid Carson Wentz, which was controversial. Everybody gave him crap at the time. Pretty good decision in hindsight. You have the Packers taking Jordan Love. I would not give that an A+ yet. We've seen half a season from Love. We don't know if that's been the right decision yet. I'll still say it's early returns say good, but still I'm going to give that an incomplete. And then the Falcons just paid Kirk Cousins, and then they doubled down and drafted Michael Penix at number 8. So we just saw that in the draft. But the original, like, of the modern era of, let's say 2000 on, the original, like, putting your nuts on the table and saying, this is my guy, I don't care what everybody else thinks. It was Belichick doing it for Tom Brady. That took balls. It really did. And I think that's my big takeaway is, like, obviously it was the right decision. I mean, they won 6 Super Bowls together. We know that. But I was probably still young enough to not really feel like what the media backlash was against that decision.
Well, and even like I think Jackie McMullen, who it was kind of cool. I remember watching her on Around the Horn. I haven't seen her in years. I'm assuming she's retired.
She still does a lot of basketball. Like the Celtics are her main background.
Oh, okay, gotcha. But I remember she said, she goes, now understand for a second, Belichick, this is not like the Bill that we know nowadays. She goes, when he made this decision, it was just assumed to be the wrong one because he didn't have success in Cleveland. He didn't have success in his first year, and they were 0-2.
Yeah.
Like going, and I know obviously by the time that when Bledsoe got cleared, things had picked up again, but I'm sure there was a lot of people, even like that Rams game. That was actually, I'm sure I watched that Rams game, not the Super Bowl, of course, the Week 11 game or whatever.
Yeah, I remember watching that one too.
It's kind of like this was, I do have to say, so much better than America's game. Like it was a lot of the same people that had been in the America's games, but that was so NFL Networky.
It had a positive spin on everything.
Yes.
And those players, half the players that were on America's game were still playing for the Patriots, so they weren't going to give the dirt.
But I remember in the America's game episode, they spun that Rams game when they only lost by a touchdown, which was good, but they spun that in that America's game like, hey, like, we're so close, look at what we just did. In this episode, they were like, holy shit, like Brady did not look good. And like there was like a sense of, oh man, like, do we need to reconsider this decision now?
I'll give you
I found that very interesting.
I'll give you another example too. It's been a little bit easier for them in terms of controversy because it's been so seamless, but the 49ers with Brock Purdy as well.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So, like, because a lot of people gave them crap, and the fantasy football dorks were the first people to do it because they're like, but the 3rd overall pick draft capital. And it's like, but Brock Purdy's been like the 3rd best quarterback in the league since he's taken over as a starter. So, like, Are you really going to move off that? Like, I mean, if you want to look at statistics, Brock Purdy's been a top 5 guy. But like, I agree with you because that Rams game, America's game made it seem like, it's we're almost there. The Patriots did not feel like they were almost there. I still remember that 2001 season. They kind of came out of nowhere. When the NFL playoffs started, I was like, I was thinking to myself, there's probably 5 teams that could realistically win the Super Bowl. The Rams were by far the heavy favorite.
It felt like it was going to be Rams Steelers.
Rams Steelers. I would have given the Ravens a shot, and I would have given Green Bay a shot. I would say 4, but Green Bay had to go to St. Louis because Green Bay unfortunately didn't even win their division that year. They were rated really high in the 0-1 season, but they were the wild card. They were the 4 seed going in and forced to play St. Louis. The Eagles came out of nowhere kind of in the NFC to maybe give the Rams a run. But really, realistically, like if you went back in time and asked the average fan, no one was saying, oh, and the Raiders, that's 5.
Yeah, the Raiders.
Yeah, the Raiders were a heavy favorite. Else. Yeah, it's just been so long since we thought about the Raiders being Super Bowl favorites. But like the Raiders honestly would have been a team on paper you would have loved to pick. And a lot of people did. But no one was thinking the Patriots are going to be this team. Like they were underdogs at home. They were lucky to be a 2 seed as an 11-5 team. Like, you know, we don't have 2 teams in each conference getting bye weeks anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But like, that's one of the worst regular season teams in recent memory to get a bye in the playoffs. Was that 0-1 Patriots team? Like that was, but they got hot at the right time, and they won games ugly, but like it was the perfect Belichick team where they just did like all the nitty gritty right things. And to Tom Brady's credit, what he was able to do is he managed it. He just didn't make a ton of mistakes.
Right.
He kept them in the game, and then sometimes as a quarterback and a leader of a team, keeping your team in the game is a lot of the times the best thing you can do, because in the case of the Tuck game, the ball bounced your way and they got lucky and they won that game. But the first episode really highlights kind of the magic of that 0-1 season. And I think the big takeaway, if you weren't around, or if you weren't watching football yet at that time, your main takeaway should be that Tom Brady was not the greatest quarterback of all time at that point in his career.
Me and you were texting. What was kind of cool about Brady in that episode was the little condo that he had with the defensive lineman from Purdue. I can't think of it. Nugent was his last name.
Yeah.
It just seemed so like you, and I even sent you that little meme on I saw it on Twitter today, and it was a picture of Brady like as a rookie and Brady now, and it was like
ugly Brady versus like supermodel.
It was
Brady.
like, oh, you're not ugly. You're just poor.
Yeah. Brady looks like Brady in 2001 or 2000 looks older than he does now. And he's in his mid 40s, because I mean, granted, like his diet and everything's great, but I'm not going to speculate on how he looks so young or anything like that. But like it showed, like the joke and the meme was, it's like, you can look however you want if you have a lot of money.
Exactly. So, but it was cool to see that. But it was probably like, it shows really where the Patriots were too. Like they didn't have good facilities back then.
Not a ton of teams did.
They didn't. No, they didn't. And of course, that was just at the time that teams were able to self-market for the first time. And like they were making their own revenue based off of their own advertising. They hadn't. I think the Cowboys were the first team to do that. I think they did it with Pepsi or something. But I think that was only like in 1995 or something, which is relatively recent when you consider. But the Patriots didn't have good facilities, and so like Tom Brady probably didn't, like he was looking to, and now he's got so much money now.
Yeah.
But back then he was, he's obviously better off than me or you, but he was looking for ways to kind of live a modest lifestyle at that point. He was really all about ball just then.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting to me is like you hear so much about like, when you watch the NFL draft, you're hearing, how do these guys, like, how talented they are coming out of college, and how they're so transcendent, right? They're generational talents. We hear every 2 years there's a generational quarterback, which is funny in its own right. But like, and a lot of the times, like, obviously, like Trevor Lawrence, Joe Burrow, Caleb Williams, like we've all seen them. They have great talent. Like Caleb Williams, he's great off script. He can make every throw. You can say the same thing about all those guys, right?
Yeah.
But like, what usually actually makes the difference? Like, all of those guys are talented. Hell, Bryce Young's talented. Bryce Young can accurately throw the ball with anybody. We saw him do it in the SEC. But what to me makes the difference between like the super talented, like Jeff George types, because he had all the talent, but he didn't have like the demeanor, that
Yeah. The
intangible,
moxie.
the moxie, and that's what Brady had. And I think like what caught on to me so quickly is how like he just fit that team like a glove. Like
Yeah.
because he went in there and he cared about one thing. And this is where I give Brady tons of credit. Is he is arguably the greatest like it's just kind of an oxymoron because I'm measuring intangibles here. But
Yeah.
like the greatest intangibles quarterback of all time, he's right up there with Bart Starr.
Yeah.
In terms of like he just does all the little things right, and he's gonna contribute to a winning culture. And that's something I think now we overlook that, right? We
Yeah.
think talent alone wins, and it doesn't. Like I would even say with Burrow, the reason he's been so great since he's gotten to the league, it's like it's not just his arm talent. Like sure he has that. A lot of these guys have arm talent.
Hmm.
It's Burrow. I would say it's because he's got swag. Like everybody thinks Joe Burrow's cool. Joe Montana had swag, right? He was cool under pressure, and that's like the vibe I got from Brady.
Yeah.
Is he wasn't out there like making these dynamite throws. It was just like you go in the huddle and you're like a guard. You're gonna block your ass off for that dude.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
and
You,
that stuff matters.
remember Damian Woody said that he used to go out drinking with the guys and he would like be drinking guys under the table.
Yeah.
Like, and they were like, damn, like they're like, he's not just some pretty boy California, you know, quarterback. He's here and he's showing us how much he appreciates us and how much
Yep.
he he wants to be around us. And they were even like that, and that translated over to Sunday.
Yep.
We wanted to bust our ass for him because he showed us over the week who he was.
Yeah, I always, and this translates to the business world. The Patriots, you could learn a lot from the Patriot way. I
Mhm.
mean, name a more successful organization in America over the last 20 years than Belichick and Brady's Patriots with Robert Kraft, right? And I think a lot of it had to do with leadership. And one thing Brady, like you mentioned, he had that leadership quality of kind of being approachable. And I think in business, I would recommend to any, aspiring manager or leader in whatever business you're in, if you go into politics or whatever, is you have to have some type of approachability, but also like understanding of what other people can do for you.
Yeah.
And those people have to see you as approachable and like you understand their role. And somebody told me, like one person I met with that was very successful in business before. He said sometimes the worst thing that can happen to management is when they get out of touch with the people that they work with, because they get so into their world that the common guy in the locker room or in the office, they can't go to them with their problems. Like they're not even the same stratosphere
Yeah.
uh in terms of workplace culture and things like that. And it made me think as a Packers fan how frustrating that is with Aaron Rodgers, because what we heard from the last like 5, 6 years he was in Green Bay is how hard he was to work with young players. And I never felt like that happened with Brady.
Yeah.
I think towards the end, Brady kind of dictated more who he got to work with, and they let it happen. But like I felt like the end of the Rodgers era, as talented as they were, like, and the thing that always bugged me is the people that made the points about like, oh, if they just drafted T. Higgins instead of Jordan Love, they would have won the Super Bowl. I'm like, that dude ain't throwing to T. Higgins in the NFC title game.
Yeah,
Like,
right.
no, he's going to Devontae, and it's gonna be incomplete. We're gonna punt, and the same result's gonna happen whether it's Marquez Valdez Scantling or Equiminius St. Brown. It doesn't matter. Like he didn't even trust Devontae until like his third year in Green Bay. Like it's just he literally never trusted a rookie receiver or even really a second year receiver.
Mhm.
Like so like that was my number one takeaway from the first episode, and they go on and win the Super Bowl. Uh, but like that's one of my favorite teams, to be honest, because like number one, I love when teams kind of spit in the face of like, I mean, we had Aaron
The
shots
status
on him.
quo.
Well, and they kind of spit in the face of like predictability and like what people think make good football teams.
Yeah.
Because I love numbers. I think like analytics are a great way to look at the game and kind of try and get an understanding. But this game's still played by human beings. And I love kind of the cultural message that '01 Patriots team kind of left. So I enjoyed the first episode. Um,
Yeah. Episode 2 was all about the snowball, which was um
bullshit.
which was bullshit. It was.
Yeah,
And even they even admit it now to this day. Like there
they
was
got away
years
with
there
it.
where they were like, yeah, no, it's it's the letter of the law. It's supposed to be. And like now they're like, yeah, like
Eh.
it sucks that we want it that way. But even like we're talking about like how magic that season felt for them. The magic like that would that night if you they were interviewing I don't forget what the guy's title was, like director of
Ernie Adams.
Ernie Adams, yes.
Yeah.
He was some sort of like director of strategy or something like that for Bill. He's basically Bill's right-hand guy. He was his confidant on the field, in the booth, wherever he was.
Hmm.
Um, and he said, like one of the first things, like when he was driving to Foxborough Stadium, which was going to be the last game at Foxborough Stadium ever. So like we're talking like this is like Matt, like this is the way this is all unfolding is unreal. He goes, we hadn't had snow that entire winter. And he said, and we didn't have snow after that. But that day we got hit by a blizzard just as soon as this fast West Coast team comes into our stadium to play us.
Yeah. Had Jerry
And
Rice and Tim Brown and
yep,
all those guys. Charlie Garner.
Charlie Garner and Tyrone
Yeah.
Wheatley.
Hmm.
And he had a great defense too.
Yep.
Um,
Charles
but
Woodson.
Charles Woodson. But it's just interesting. And he said like they were playing like clips that I'm guessing that were on sports radio or that were on TV at the time. And everybody that was like, calling into whatever radio station, like the consensus was, yeah, it's been a fun year, but there's no way they beat the Raiders. Like the Raiders are gonna and he was like
Oh, they were
he
right. Like
yeah.
yeah,
He
the
goes,
Raiders were a better team. Like they
he was driving to the stadium and he goes, and he just had a smile on his face because he was like, we're gonna shock the world tonight. And god damn it, did they. Have you ever gone back to watch that game?
I've watched highlights of it. Like I've watched a condensed version of it.
Yeah, I
I
watched it over COVID, like 2020 sometime.
I bet you didn't
It's
watch it live because you were probably like heartbroken.
I was heartbroken that day. I was over I still remember where I was. I was over at my mom's friend's house sleeping over, and her dad um was like, my friend Michaela, her dad was like, do you want to watch it with me? And I was like, no, I don't like football anymore. Because the
What's
Bears
what's
had just lost a few hours before.
what's crazy is I believe that day you had two Hall of Fame coaches earn their first playoff wins.
He,
Andy Reid.
no, technically Reed would have had That was actually Reed's third playoff win.
Oh yeah, because he won the wild card game. Duh.
Yes,
Yeah.
and he would have won the year before they beat Tampa 2 years in a row.
Oh yeah, you're right. Okay, never mind.
Yes.
I don't. But Belichick actually. So Andy Reid had a playoff win before Belichick did.
Yeah, he
Yeah,
did.
that's
That's
kind of
true.
crazy. Yeah. So like,
Um,
what's kind of funny with like, but going into that game, it was like, the Patriots, like I mentioned earlier, they were not considered this juggernaut team. Like when
no.
you think of the 2010s, like going into Foxborough was basically like a death sentence unless you were Baltimore.
Yeah.
But like, you did not walk in there and usually win in the playoffs. Or in the case of Miles Jack, like, you can run into the end zone, but you're still down. But like, you don't go to Foxborough and win. And it was kind of like everything kind of happened and it kind of set the tone for 20 years. But one thing I will say about this game, I think this is the biggest what if game of the 20th century or 21st century
Yeah, I was
so
singing
far.
that too, actually, and just even watching that, like so much. This game changed the NFL.
Yes, because let's say let's reverse the scenario. Tuck rule it doesn't exist. Charles Woodson strips Tom Brady. Raiders get the ball, they win, right?
Yeah.
So let's go through the scenarios. So the Raiders probably go into Pittsburgh, I would think, the following week. Do they win that game?
Um.
I think so.
Yeah, probably. It would be. It would be.
They have
It
a
would be
better
a toss up,
quarterback.
but I would probably take the Raiders. They had a better quarterback than the Steelers did.
Yeah, and their defense was arguably just as good as those Steelers teams. But like, so the Raiders, number one, that's a great Super Bowl matchup. Um, Raiders Rams would have been fire. I
Mhm.
think that's what most people wanted.
Yeah.
Let's say that if the Raiders get to the Super Bowl, does John Gruden stay in
Oh,
Oakland?
certainly.
So John Gruden stays in Oakland. Do they end up having their team kind of like set on fire 3 years later, and the Raiders become one of the worst franchises in the sport for like 15 years? Or I
Yeah.
mean, honestly, they're still there. They haven't really gotten out of it.
Yes. No, they haven't. Are they still in Oakland?
Yeah, I don't know because like they can't build a stadium for the
Yeah. No.
A's
Yeah, they
either.
weren't going to
So,
build. Yeah, obviously they weren't going to build a stadium,
but
but
like, but I think like so you have the Raiders standpoint because the first thing too is like we were at
can
the
I just say
very
something right now? Baseball sucks. The Cubs have a no hitter going into the eighth inning, and they just pulled the starter because of probably a pitch count.
gross.
That's
Yeah.
such bullshit.
What happened to the game I love, man? But I still remember when Randy Johnson had a perfect game. I saw that live. It was
Oh
against the
yeah.
Braves. Yeah, and like I, not to go on to a baseball tangent. That's like a completely different. We have to create a new podcast to do old souls baseball. But
Yeah.
baseball was so much better. Like not to be that guy, but like baseball was so much better 20 years ago than it is now. I
Yeah.
like it. You might think that we think football was so much better 20 years. Like I like football now,
Yeah.
but
Football is a
I
great sport still.
I love football history too. I love all of it. Like
Yes.
baseball, I could not give a crap about the current game. Like I can't even watch my favorite team. Like
Yeah.
I have to get cable, which I haven't had cable in like 7 years. That's the only way I can watch the Braves. Or I have to like, and I want YouTube TV because I have to get Sunday Ticket. So I'm kind of out of luck. So Rob Manfred, great job. You just ensured that I don't care about your sport. So way to go. But to go back on topic, uh so we had the Raiders. And one thing that a lot of people today, when you think of the Raiders, you think of like I would argue that they're one of the worst franchises of the last 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of record, when you think of poor decision making from the front offices, the Raiders are up there, right? Jacksonville, Cleveland, Carolina recently,
Honestly,
uh,
the Bears are up there.
the Bears, Raiders, like those are the teams you think of, but the Raiders are like at the lowest and like
Yes. Yeah.
of the totem pole. There's only a couple of teams like Cleveland that are truly worse than them.
And we're talking about a team that went to the Super Bowl the next year still.
Yeah. Yeah, their last playoff win was the 2002 AFC title game against Tennessee.
Yeah, right.
So, they have not. Bill Callahan was their coach when they won that. That's how long ago it's been. So, like, Bill Callahan hasn't been a
now
head coach.
His son is a head coach in the league.
Bill Callahan was a coach at Nebraska more recently than the Raiders won. Yeah. Bill Callahan, low key, actually a pretty good coach in Nebraska. He should have won the Big 12. They got screwed.
Yes,
against
they did.
Texas. Like we're going off on tangents now, but like if there's one team you should ever root against in college football, it's Texas.
Yes,
that team destroyed college football. Like it destroyed it. Like all of this conference realignment bullcrap where you have Cal and Stanford are in the ACC now.
Yeah.
The Atlantic,
Oregon, UCLA, USC, and Washington are in the Big Ten.
Think about it though. Cal is in the Atlantic Coast Conference. Think about the great rivalry that you're going to have with Boston College and Cal. Like that's going to be fire. Like Texas was the one responsible for, because they had their own damn cable network. It's just we're going off on tangents now, but like going back to the Raiders, they're one of the worst run franchises, right? So does that get completely flipped? Because like let's say they win a Super Bowl, they don't blow it up when they get rid of John Gruden. Tampa Bay probably, like, what do? Do they fire Tony Dungy because they let Tony Dungy go, knowing that John Gruden's not available? Do the Colts end up with Dungy? And then on the flip side with the Patriots, does Tom Brady keep his job if he loses that playoff game and he doesn't win the Super Bowl? Like, or do they give it back to Drew Bledsoe? Does Belichick not have the kind of the public relations and the political willpower to keep Brady under center? What happens with Buffalo? Maybe does Buffalo get Brady?
Yeah.
Or do they trade Brady to another team for a first round pick? There's so much what ifs, all from a rule that never really made any sense. It's kind of crazy how the Tuck rule changed. And the other thing is, if the Patriots don't make the Super Bowl, like, do the Rams, are they the dynasty of the 2000s? And do they stay in St. Louis?
Yeah.
Because they have all that staying power. So, like, it's just one play made a lot of difference.
Certainly.
So episode 3.
Yeah, so episode 3 now, they obviously, after the Patriots win the Snow Bowl, the Tuck Bowl game, they get to the AFC Championship, and not long into that game, Brady goes down. He gets rolled up really bad. And who comes on the field? Drew Bledsoe. And Drew Bledsoe, who I looked at the stats, obviously he was very rusty, but people were kind of, he obviously he leads the Patriots to victory, but people were talking about like, should Bledsoe start? But based on what he did in the AFC Championship, it would not be somebody that I'd be like, oh my God, yeah, there's no way we can win with him on the bench. Like he, the Patriots did get a blocked field goal and ran it back for a touchdown. That is a massive 10-point swing in a game that you only won by 7. I'm not saying that the Patriots didn't deserve that, but there was certainly some luck involved that helped them get there. Drew Bledsoe, though his contribution should be appreciated to winning that AFC Championship, he was certainly not the reason why they got to the Super Bowl. But
I will tell you why the New England Patriots won that game. And Bledsoe deserves credit for coming in and not fumbling the game away. But
yeah,
he only did go 10 of 21 for 100 yards. So
yes,
it's not awesome. He had a touchdown pass, so good for him. I'll tell you who won them the game. Cordell Stewart won them the game. He had 3 interceptions.
Oh, Jesus. Yeah, look at that.
And he got sacked 3
times.
Yeah, 3 sacks, 3 picks.
Lost a fumble.
3.5 passer rating. So basically 4 turnovers. If you turn the ball over 4 times and your name is not Russell Wilson, you're going to lose a playoff game.
Yeah.
So Russell Wilson can get away with that, but very few other. I guess Brady technically, I think he turned it over a good bit in the Super Bowl against Atlanta, and they still won. But like outside of crazy scenarios, you're gonna lose a game. And Cordell Stewart, that was like kind of his last moment before people realized, like, oh, this guy's not good.
Yeah, Jerry Angelo didn't learn that from.
Yeah, because I think the following year Stewart started in the 0-2, but he lost his job to Tommy Maddox.
Tommy Maddox,
And then
XFL Tommy Maddox.
And then Tommy Maddox won a playoff game. He had that huge comeback against Cleveland.
Mm-hmm.
And in the wild card game, great game if you want to go back and watch. And then I think he got the start the following season was terrible because it's Tommy Maddox. Like, what did you expect? I would say Tommy Maddox was still probably a better starting quarterback than Kenny Pickett. So there's that. But then you get Big Ben. So like, yeah. So I think there's a lot of but that's kind of the early the Steelers kind of backed their way into Ben Roethlisberger. I think a lot like this might have been the game that kind of propelled that situation.
Eventually led that.
Yeah. So,
but anyway, so like, you know, once it became real that the Patriots are going to the Super Bowl, you know, there was a cool on the field interview with Drew Bledsoe afterwards. Certainly, as much as we said he didn't play well, what a ride for him to get back to the Super Bowl, considering he was probably at one point closer to death than he was to living at one point in that season. So, you know, he gets them there. But then the documentary takes a bit of a turn. So, which I was kind of wondering why they hadn't talked about this yet. Like, yes, you know, Robert Kraft takes over and the Patriots' fortunes change, and here they are, they're going for a Super Bowl. But this is not the first Super Bowl that Robert Kraft was a part of. This is the second Super Bowl. He was in a Super Bowl 5 years earlier with the Patriots, of course.
Patriots fans never like to bring this one up, though.
Patriots fans don't like to bring this up. Actually, it's kind of weird. The Patriots' first 3 Super Bowls all played in Superdome.
Yeah.
But anyways, that game, yes, played in the Superdome, Super Bowl 31. They were led by Bill Parcells, and they ran into a buzzsaw Green Bay Packers team. And I guess the overriding story of that week was, and a lot of the Patriots players were like, Drew Bledsoe was talking about it, like it pissed them off. Like he was like, nobody talked about like how we had turned the ship around in a few years, and here we were on the doorstep of a Super Bowl. All that was talked about was the Parcells Robert Kraft marriage basically ending.
Yeah.
And from what I could gather, there was only one line. Maybe you might know more than me, or you might remember more.
I read the book, so I remember a lot of it.
So basically what Parcells said was that they had taken away the draft from his control, and they had kind of like, did they disperse like the responsibilities amongst people that he didn't believe should have it?
Yeah, I believe it was Chris Greer, who
really?
Yeah, so who's the guy in Miami now? Is it
it is Chris Greer.
His dad. I think it's Robbie Greer.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so Chris Greer's dad was the kind of
Chris Greer was a scout in New England at the time.
Yeah, so I think like his dad, I want to say, I'm just kind of going off from what I remember, because there's a book called The Dynasty as well. That's what this documentary is actually based off of. But Belichick, or not, Parcells loses the control basically of the player personnel, which is, and it kind of came back to the Belichick issue, just like this offseason when he was trying to get the Falcons job. They didn't want to give that up.
Yeah.
So like the Parcells people that kind of grew up in that, like Belichick and them, they want to control not only the coaching, but also like they want to be able to pick the groceries. Some
Yeah.
franchises operate like that. Others don't. Like Green Bay, I know they never have been like that. The coach does not have that much control. Bill Belichick, Bill Parcells, they've always like scouted the players. They run the scouting department, and then it's really the head coach that makes the decision on who comes in to the building, right? And but certain organizations work one some ways and others don't. But it what it showcased to me is number one, I think we can all agree that Parcells has an ego. I think
Yep.
that's pretty much understood. But Robert Kraft has an ego,
Yes.
and I'm guessing that's going to come back and showcase itself a few more times before the end of this documentary.
Yeah.
And but it's like he was willing to basically part ways with the best coach in the league, because I would still say Parcells was the best coach in the league at the time,
Hmm.
and got a young Patriots team to the Super Bowl, and they really overachieved that year. He got them back fast. And they were super successful, but they parted ways the year they won the AFC and got to the Super Bowl. Belichick was a defensive coordinator on that staff. They end up going to Pete Carroll, and you mentioned before the show, what was so interesting is like not a word about Pete Carroll.
Not one mention of him.
Yeah, and he had three kind of like, they weren't bad, but they weren't like
Midland.
memorable. They weren't memorable seasons. They were just like they were middle of the road, right? And Belichick gets there in 2000 was actually worse than any of the
Yeah.
it was worse than any of the Pete Carroll seasons. So, but anyway, like it kind of it goes to show that the Patriots had like, I think Kraft cares about the success of the team, but like I think sometimes he gets in his own way,
Yeah.
and he wants to run it, and like, it shows you that an overeager owner can kind of overstep sometimes.
Well, it's funny when you heard in a previous episode, Kraft had been saying like he was touting his own football. I guess he played somewhere in college or whoever he played for. I don't remember.
Yeah.
Um, so he was kind of he sees himself as a football guy. But when you hear Parcells talk about him, Parcells will tell you he has no background in football. So it's funny, how certain people, it's, it's
Yeah.
to,
I and
teach their own sort of a thing.
Yeah, like, and Jerry Jones played football, but like ultimately I think he needed Parcells in the early 2000s because their whole scouting and player development program was so broken. I think he needed Parcells to come in and fix it.
Yeah.
And they're still probably reaping the benefits of what Parcells brought them in terms of like how they scout and develop players. I mean, they're a lot better than what they were in the early 2000s. But anyway, the Patriots, they win that Super Bowl. We have talked Super Bowl 36 and a
Yeah.
lot because we had Jim Thomas on and had
I
a
was
great
thinking
discussion.
about Mike. I was thinking about Jim Thomas when Mike Martz was on there.
Yeah. You go back and like watch that game though. The Rams were the better team
Oh,
by far.
certainly.
Um,
Like that was even the idea. Like when the Patriots took over with the ball and I think we even said this with Jim when they took over the ball with what was it, a minute left in the clock or something like that. Their whole goal was, my God, we better score now because if the Rams get the ball in overtime, we're not going to stop them.
yeah. And to Bill Belichick and Brady's credit, they go down the field and score.
Yeah,
Or get a field goal. And John Madden said it himself, like it's one of the greatest drives in NFL history.
yeah,
And it characterizes what made Brady so great. There wasn't one throw on that drive where you're like, wow, what a
yeah,
dime.
yeah.
He
It was
just
like three dump offs, and one of them just happened to get like 15 yards or something like that.
just keep it simple, stupid. Like just
Yeah,
do the basic things right over and like And Belichick always kind of preached this later on with the do your job thing, but Brady did his job and executed, and the whole team did, and like they won the Super Bowl because of it. I think it's one of the best coaching jobs in NFL history,
Yeah.
bar none. It was that 01 Patriots team. The 02 season they completely glossed over, which I thought was funny because I think like the I know it's like it's a forgettable season. I think they went 9-7. They nearly won the division.
Yeah, they did.
And I want to say they kept the Dolphins out.
Yeah, them
Week
beating the
17,
Dolphins opened
the
opened the
Jets,
door for the Jets to win the AFC East.
which
So
caused the Packers to lose home field advantage in the playoffs.
that's right, because the Jets
Yeah.
beat the Packers.
Yeah. Thanks,
But just
Patriots.
go back to Super Bowl 36. Robert Kraft. Now, I'm not. You're neutral. We're both neutral on Robert Kraft. Don't love him, hate him. He's kind of a weird guy, as they all are. But damn, did he nail the speech after when he accepted the Vince Lombardi Trophy?
I have a
He,
hard time believing that he's like, oh, I just thought of that on the elevator ride down.
yeah,
Get out of here.
Yeah. It was
Come on. Like,
9/11.
he probably thought of something like that. He, like, of course, the
Months
9/11.
before that. Yeah.
Yeah, but like, I think he probably started thinking about that once he won the AFC. Like,
Yeah.
it started popping up. Get out of here with the, oh,
Yeah.
like that's when you know that, like, I mean, and it's the story that he always brings up where like Brady like goes up and shakes his hand like right after they draft him. It's
Oh
like,
yeah,
I'm the
you're the
greatest
greatest decision.
like, I don't know, like it could have happened. Of course, I wasn't there to confirm or deny that. Like, I don't know, man. I just like that's
If
pretty
I got
ballsy
drafted
of
by
a
the Patriots, I would go up to Robert Kraft and say the same thing to him.
yeah,
Just to see if it would happen for me. Hey, it
it's
worked for the
like,
last guy who did this.
and then it's like you look at the transaction wire. It's like they waive Neil Martin. Like,
Neil was cut.
yeah, I like Brady could have been like like knowing Robert Kraft. He's like, oh, he said it after the Super Bowl, after we had won it. Well,
Yeah, I
yeah,
totally
duh.
forgot about that.
Yeah,
I got
but
my timelines mixed up.
so they fast forward through the 02 season, which I thought was a missed opportunity because like they underperformed and Brady kind of had a poor year. Um, and what it showed to me is like the way they rebounded. I think that like, you can't have the 03-04 teams without the 02 season.
Yeah.
Because I think it was like Belichick had to get them kind of back in focus. And I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of people were like, oh, yeah, the Patriots, what a fluke. That'll never happen again.
Yeah. Well, that's what we talked about in the first episode that we've
Yeah.
ever done. We
Yeah.
talked about how people probably saw them as a 1-year wonder.
Yeah. They were the 17 Eagles for all we knew.
Yes.
So like it was Nick Foles, like Brady and Nick Foles. What's the difference, right? Backup quarterback leading. Yeah. He's not a franchise guy. You can't trust Nick Foles. You can't trust Tom Brady to lead your franchise. But in 03, they put all that to rest. They were arguably the most dominant team. I would say they were the most dominant team. They went 14-2. So
yeah.
They dominate their way through the AFC Championship. Play a close game with Tennessee in the divisional round, but they win a classic Super Bowl game against Carolina.
Yeah.
And then in 04, and this is my take. And like we haven't watched all the way through the Dynasty, but like of the best Patriots team of the last of the 2000s and early the 2000s and 2010s, the best team was the 07.
Oh God, yeah.
But I think I would argue, and let me know if you disagree. I think the best team that won a Super Bowl was the 04 team.
Yes, I would. Yeah, I would agree with that.
The only reason they didn't go, they had to go to Pittsburgh is because
Pittsburgh beat them on Halloween.
Yeah, and Pittsburgh didn't lose a game when they started Roethlisberger. Like,
yeah,
but they kind of cemented their legacy. They're arguably, I would say, a top 10 team all time. That 04 team.
Yeah, they'd be.
I wouldn't put them top 5. Like I wouldn't put them like obviously with the 85 Bears or the So I would put them right in line with like the 96 Packers. I think they're kind of in that range. But that 04 team was really special. Um, and that cemented the dynasty, the first dynasty. Um, it's kind of crazy that they end up having basically two
2 of
dynasties
them. Yeah, and we thought we
10
thought
years
the
apart.
dynasty was a fluke at one point
No.
because like remember like I guess it would have been 10 years ago now. Me and you were saying, "Hey, it's been 10 years since the Patriots won a Super Bowl." Little did we know they were about to do that whole thing all over again.
What's going to be interesting to see is if, because it's kind of too bad that Andy Reid's already like probably within 5 to 8 years of retirement. I would
Yeah.
say like probably closer to 5. It's probably too bad that we'll never see what the Chiefs will be able to do in terms of matching that. They've won 3 with
Yeah.
Mahomes. I think they're going to win another before it's all said and done.
Yeah, it's hard to see them not win it this year, in all
But
honesty.
what's funny is like, when Brady left New England and Brady, well, we'll never see anything like this. And I'm starting to be like, I don't know about that. I think
Yeah.
we might get Mahomes every year in the
Here we
Super
go
Bowl.
now.
And Mahomes is not even 30 years old yet. I think when Brady won his third, how old was he? Was
He
he
was 24 in 01, so he would have been 27 by 04.
so Mahomes is technically on that pace. Now,
Yeah, Mahomes
what
is the
Brady
same
did
age
in
as me. I'm 28,
so
and
what
he's got 3.
yeah, but what's going to be what Brady and what I'll say is what makes Brady the GOAT, arguably. I still think it's arguable. I think he has a case. I think the other players also have a case. Is what he did in his 30s and 40s. I think that's
Yes.
what
Oh,
I
yeah. Yeah. Like he blew away everybody else by what he did in his 30s and 40s.
the 2000s Patriots. What you should take away is, to me, the 2000s Patriots were. I think it was a Belichick masterclass. He was by far and away the best coach of that era, and it showed when you go back and watch these games. And I think the way the episode ends, it talks about the '07 season,
Yeah.
and it starts with Spygate.
Yeah,
How do you?
I was kind of shocked. Well, I was kind of laughing to myself when they had that New Jersey police officer,
Yeah,
that was like it reminded me like I at first like I watch a lot of true crime shows. Like I love my Bundy documentaries and my
yeah.
all that stuff. And it felt like I was watching like this documentary on a serial killer or something. The way that like it was like um just the cinematography of like just that moment like where they caught the Patriots. I was like, wait a second, what am I
I'll
watching right now?
I'll be honest with you. Like, do number one, do I think it was cheating? Actually, yes, I do. I think it goes. I think it gives you about as much competitive advantage as George Brett having too much pine tar in his bat. Like,
Yeah.
in my opinion. And then number two, like they got punished for it or they deserve it, yes. However, in hindsight, it's pretty cringy how crazy people got over that.
Yeah.
Uh, just because like in the NFL, like, Roger did not have a good start of his and I think
No, he did not.
he's still dealing with the repercussions of how he handled Spygate. Like people do not trust the guy.
No.
Who told him, you know what's a great idea, Roger? Let's destroy all the evidence.
With a
What
hammer.
what he should have done is if you want transparency and you want to make everybody feel better, is like 5 years after, so like all the signals have changed, just do an NFL network special. Here's all the evidence that we have.
Yeah.
Like the
Sorry,
Patriots,
everybody.
this is what the Patriots had. But we've had like I'm on the same thing. Like like we've had Bounty Gate, like and other cheating scandals. You've had guys do PEDs. To me, it's up there with that. I don't think it takes away, and I think the Patriots proved that in '07. They get caught cheating, they get reprimanded for it. I think Belichick probably should have gotten suspended for like a game or two, because
Mhm.
Sean Payton gets an entire season, and he wasn't even directly running the bounty ring.
Right.
Like, I thought there was a huge disconnect between those. But the Patriots go out and prove it wasn't just cheating that helped them win. I think that goes to show you, like, the '07 team is arguably the most dominant team in NFL history.
Yeah,
And
we'll
definitely,
never see that ever again.
I remember watching those games. There were very few instances where I was like, the only time I thought the Patriots were going to lose that entire season,
The Ravens game?
the Ravens game. And yeah, and
Yeah.
most people are like, the Giants, week 17. Actually, the Giants game, week 17, I never felt like the Patriots lost control of the game.
Well, that game, it just almost felt like inevitable that the
Yeah.
Patriots are going to win.
Yeah. Well, but I never felt, when you watch a game live, and I know Aaron Schatz would probably laugh at me for this, but like, you just get a feel, man. You just feel, you have a feel of who's controlling the game,
Yeah.
right? Like, you can give me win probabilities on where the ball is, and I agree with that 90% of the time. But like, that NFC
You trust
Championship,
you trust your gut.
on yeah. Well, for example, like, a lot of people say, like, analytically speaking, it made sense for Detroit to go for it on 4th down, because it would. But I'm like, at the same time, I'm like, if you go up 2 possessions, or I can't remember the scenario, it might have been 3 possessions if they kicked the field goal. Like, if you go up 3 possessions, I feel like you kill any type of momentum that San Francisco has. You can't measure momentum. And like, when you watch the '07 Patriots, like, the one thing I'll say about, like, if you go back and rewatch the games, the sense is you can't keep up with them. They were so explosive on offense, and their defense was still really good. Like, you felt hopeless. And the only
Yeah.
team that could figure out how to stop that was a team that could hit Brady. And very few teams could do it except the Giants. Like, the Giants finally figured out, we're going to just bully Brady in the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
But that's actually, we're not supposed to go into Super Bowl 42, because that's actually our stopping point.
No, they talked about it.
I think our stopping point was at the very, like, they're going to the Super Bowl.
No, they made the Super Bowl. Did you fall asleep?
I might have.
Yeah.
No, I swear the episode ends.
No,
with them.
because they showed them, like, walking off the field. They showed, like, how dejected they were. Somebody said that there was guys puking and crying in the locker room. I was like,
It's like a
puking?
South.
Christ.
The way the way you're describing it now, it's like we live in a South Park episode. It's like,
Yeah.
I picture them all going like, "Oh my god!" Yeah, but I will say this though, and I hope every Patriots fan is listening. I have never been happier.
That was
the greatest moment ever, and that should make you feel good as a Patriots fan, though. Because
it's good to be the bad guy.
Yeah, I would love to have people hate the Packers the way people hate the Patriots, because then I could be like, yeah, but we've won 6 Super Bowls. Blah, 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 blah. Like, we asked, what is it, the Boston kid at the parade? It's like, it's been 28 days
McGillicuddy or something like that.
It's been 28 days since our last parade. I'm just like, and then, like, you have places like Cincinnati. It's like, it's been 50 years since my grandpa was, like, in high school when we had our last parade or something like that. What's the worst city for, like, just general sports? Detroit currently is
Minnesota.
Horrible. Yeah.
Minnesota hasn't won anything since 91.
Who won in 91? The Twins.
The Twins. Yeah.
Kirby Puckett, right?
Kirby Puckett.
Yeah. Yeah. I kind of keep it that way for as long as it's the Vikings.
Yeah. I could care. Well, even like watching, like, the Timberwolves lose like they did there in the playoffs was that was kind of like, yeah, I just like to think that I have nothing against the Timberwolves. Truly, I don't. I could care less. But I like to think that there's Vikings fans that were also upset about that.
Yeah, but like with the Patriots losing Super Bowl 42, that's one of those games. Like I think karma bit them for the Tuck rule. Like I like to think because the Tuck rule had so many like fluke scenarios happen in that game where the Raiders
Yeah.
should have won the game. In the Patriots Giants game in Super Bowl 42 had a lot of the same kind of flukes. Like all Asante Samuel has to do is catch the ball. Like,
Yeah, well, that's what even after the um after the helmet catch by David Tyree, um Teddy Bruschi was saying that he remembers looking over at the Giants sidelines, and he said like the euphoria and the fire that was in them. He was like, "Oh my God." He was like, "That was us a few years ago." Like and that was like the moment he knew like, "Oh, we're gonna lose." Like because he was just like, I know exactly how they feel, and they're not gonna let us win, at this point.
yeah. So I think overall that arguably is one of the best Super Bowls of all time. But what's crazy about the Patriots is even though we're only we just talked about basically three Super Bowl champions plus a team that went 18-0 and lost in Super Bowl 42. We're only halfway through arguably, I would say, the greatest dynasty in sports. I mean, you
Yeah,
brought up at the beginning, Jordan on the Bulls was from 84 to 98, so that's
yeah,
14 years. You had the Big Red Machine, you had none of the NFL dynasties really approached that. The other NFL dynasties approached that dominance. Um, I would say the Celtics, but you had like different variations of the Celtics, like with Bill Russell, and then you had
hmm
Larry Bird later. The Patriots, I would say, since like 1980, because I think the Celtics in the 60s, you could argue were that dominant, like the 50s and 60s Celtics.
yeah,
But like there hasn't been a pro sports team at this level. And to me, I think that's it. What this show should highlight, and what I'm afraid it's not going to, is it should highlight the greatness of everybody. But what I think is gonna happen in the second half is that it's gonna get political and they're gonna blame somebody for why they left, just like the Last Dance did. Instead of
Y-
admiring the greatness
y-
of Jordan, the greatness of Pippen, Jerry Krause assembling that roster, it's gonna turn into oh,
a
he wanted
pointing
me
game.
out. Yeah, like this is why I disbanded. And it's like, well, let's just ignore all the great things we did. Thank you again for listening to the Old Souls Football Podcast. Neil and I really appreciate all the support that all of our listeners have given. We really love talking the history of the NFL and the sport that we grew up loving. Please like, rate, and subscribe on all your favorite platforms.